Awesome. Yeah, thanks Merv and also Joe for joining in and being here. Jimmy also thanks for having me. Yeah, real quick, as Joe had mentioned, he discussed his awesome data set called Common Forms. I actually parsed a portion of Common Forms into 51 format. You can find it here on Hugging Face. It's much smaller than the whatever 300 something plus gigs, as it is just a subset. And you can easily just download the data set and kind of see all the bounding boxes and all the points of interactions in the 51 app as well. Again, everything's like just kind of pip installable. And after what you learned today from my talk, maybe you can apply some of what we cover and what you learn onto this data set if you'd like. But yeah, thank you, Joe, for putting together such a cool data set. Yeah, I really liked uh, looking through this and seeing what's in there. It's valuable. Somebody has to fill out a bunch of forms that oftentimes people don't make them fillable. So that being said, let's go ahead and get into my talk. I'm going to talk about visual document retrieval. My name is Harpreet Sahota, hacker in residence at Voxel 51. Background is just math and coding, I guess, over the last decade plus. Worked as an actuary, biostatistician, data scientist, and been doing deep learning stuff for the last few years. Um, if you'd like to connect with me, please do. Maybe if you find what I have to say worth hearing, you might want to hear more of it. And so these are places where you can hear me talk more. What we're going to do today is we're going to, overview the problem, talk about why text-only search fails on document images. We'll talk about visual document retrieval as a solution. We'll get hands-on with some code, and then I'll present like an interesting kind of use case for visual document retrieval. So let's go ahead and jump right into what the problem is. So I want to start by showing you something. So if you take a look at this GIF on the screen, like what do you see? You see paragraphs of text, of course, but there's also a lot more rich content on there, right? We have papers that have some type of diagrams and figures and things like that. There's papers with charts and various different graphics. And there's also semantically meaningful information on there, title, header, figure captions. But how would you search for documents that are like this, right? Traditional approach would be to extract text, throw it in search index, and then search with keywords. But when you do that, what happens? Well, you lose a diagram, you lose a table structure, and you lose a lot of that rich context. So it's important to realize that actually, documents, they're not just text files with images sprinkled in, right? They're actually visual artifacts that just happen to contain text. And if we treat them that way, if we let the models actually see the documents the way you and I see them, then we get to unlock a lot of value. You might be thinking, okay, well, we could do semantic search via something like Clip, right? Clip can max, images and text. And recent advancements like SIGLIP does this even better, right? And you might think the problem is solved. Not quite, though, and hopefully try to motivate an explanation as to why. So models like Clip and SIGLIP, they're trained mostly on natural images from the internet. Photos like what you see here. You can see, in images like this, there's kind of the main concept, dogs playing in the park. And so a model like Clip is going to compress this down into a single, 512 dimensional vector, and, that's more or less kind of enough to capture what matters. And just real quick and explain about how Clip works, because it's kind of the foundation for a lot of work that came after it. So essentially, there's like a dual encoder. We have an image encoder, which is a vision transformer that looks at the pixels, and the text encoder, which is a language model that processes the text, and they both are mapped to the same embedding space. And then, during this training process, Clips has something like 400 million image caption pairs. There were photos with description, and through some learning objective, the contrastive learning objective, the model is able to kind of place matching image and text pairs closer together in the embedding space. And so then when you go and you have a database that's had the images computed with, the embeddings computed over the images, you're able to find images that are kind of close by to that text query. And it's powerful for natural images. But if you look at these document pages, right, like they're a lot different from a natural image, right? There's a lot of kind of distinct concepts, if you will, here. We have abstracts, introductions, method sections, diagrams, result sections, et cetera, right? And Clip, what it would try to do is just compress all of this into the same kind of single vector. So it's trying to really summarize an entire rich document as one sentence, and you kind of lose the stuff that makes it meaningful. Not only that, but there's some kind of fundamental differences between document images and natural images, right? So natural images have a lot of dense visual information, textures, colors, objects, shapes, things like that. But documents aren't like that. There's a lot of white space, a lot of repetitive white space. There's rigid structure. There's a repeated pattern. There's really precise alignment. And so a visual document retrieval model is designed really to handle these type of characteristics. Of course, there's another problem with the model like Clip as well. You've heard Joe and Merv kind of mention this. Clip, like models, are going to process an image at a very small resolution. But when you scale a full page down to this small resolution, the text becomes really unreadable, right? That 10-point font becomes just a pixel or two tall. And even if you extract that text perfectly, you lose a lot of visual information, right? So this is a fundamental difference for why natural images are different from document images, and why those image text similarity models tend to fail on document use cases. And so for this, we have this recent kind of boom and evolution, and this is document retrieval models. So how do these models work? And I'm going to talk at a high level. I think Merv went to a lot of good technical depth. So thank you, Merv, for that. But the way these models work is, they process these document images at a much higher resolution. This way, text is readable, tables are more clear, charts have better detail, and they're able to understand the document more spatially. So instead of compressing the page into an entire vector, they understand that the documents have some spatial structure. So, Merv had talked about in her talk, multi-vector queries and things like that. And this helps preserve this kind of spatial layout, right? And some models do this by kind of dividing the page into patches, so kind of like a grid over the document. Others might use some attention mechanism where every part of the page relates to every other part. But the thing is that different parts of a query can match different regions of the document. Also, these models, they learn document-specific patterns, right? They're trained on millions of document pages, research papers, forms, reports, technical documents, things like this. And through this type of training, the specialized data set that they're trained on, they're able to learn to recognize visual patterns that are really specific to documents. So when you search for example, papers with the transformer architecture diagram, the model doesn't just look for the word transformer. It'll recognize kind of the visual pattern, the specific way boxes and the intention flows and connections are arranged. And so it's able to really understand that. And so kind of this is how it works in a nutshell, right? Like the high resolution, we get to see more details. The spatial processing preserves where things are on a page. And then the pattern recognition kind of understands what those visual structures mean. And so the result is that we're able to search for documents not just based on keywords, but kind of the content within a document, the semantic content within a document. And so this is different from, like, let's say, a traditional kind of OCR pipeline, right? Where we would take a document, extract the text, but then as you can see here in this GIF, like when we do that, when we OCR one of these visually rich documents, we kind of lose a lot of detail, right? We end up with, flat list of words and kind of tables that don't have the actual images. Charts tend to vanish. The spatial relationships, the difference between a header, a caption, what's inside the table, a lot of it is gone. But then, what a visual document retrieval model will do is, it'll see this table structure and we'll be able to maintain this relationship between rows and columns. We'll see the chart patterns, the visual trends. We'll be able to see the spatial layout and, also just they're adept at dealing with these kind of repetitive patterns that we see. So just a quick comparison, right? Like if we think about trying to do a keyword search versus semantic search, this is where things kind of start going awry. Right? When we take just a keyword search, we don't get really good results. But if we're able to do like a semantic search where we have a text query and we are then using the visual document retrieval model to perform that similarity search, we get more semantic text and content. We are able to query across visual structure, spatial layouts, and visual patterns and things like that. And just want to quickly say that, but main thing I want to get to here is the use case. So I'm going over the details here, but I have integrated a bunch of models like these visual document retrieval models into FiftyOne. A lot of them Merv had talked about as well. There's the no make embed model. I've got that in. There's the by modern vert, Cole modern vert, Gene Embeddings v4, Cole Quinn, Cole Poly, all these wonderful models, able to integrate them into FiftyOne. So you can use them kind of in your workflows. And you will get the link to the slides later. And on the speaking notes for this slide, I kind of give you a compare contrast for when to use this model, when to use another model. But for right now, interest of time, I want to kind of jump in to what we could do now, right? So we have visual document retrieval models, right? What ends up happening is that we're going to take a document image and we're going to convert this into a vector embedding, right? Now, okay, we got a vector embedding. What can we actually do with these embeddings, right? It turns out they're actually really powerful for understanding your data set. And there's really 4 interesting kind of fundamental analyses that you could do with these vector embeddings. One of them is just embedding space visualization. So when you embed a document, you're transforming it into a really high dimensional vector. And that itself is impossible to visualize directly, but we can use some dimensionality reduction technique, for example, UMAP, which I think is well suited for visual kind of use cases, and then project this down into 2 dimensions. And we see that documents are kind of close together in this high dimensional space when we visualize it this way. And we're able to kind of pick up on really interesting clusters of similar types of documents. So if you have like 1,000 documents and they form really, 5 tight clusters, this tells you that maybe in your data set, we have kind of 5 distinct document types and they have clear boundaries, which you could see in the embedding visualization. We could also use embeddings to then do some math over the embeddings, right? Because they're essentially vectors. So one thing we could do is compute distant-based metrics like uniqueness between the document images in our data set. So we can compute, how far is document A from document B in this embedding space, and we're able to come up with a measure called uniqueness, which is just a statistical measure. So for each document, just compute its average distance to all the other documents in the data set, and then normalize that between 0 and 1. So you end up with these uniqueness scores, and maybe for your data set, you have a uniqueness score that ranges from 0 to 1, but maybe like ones that have a score of 0.5, or sorry, 0.05. It means that these documents are really kind of identical to a lot of other documents in the embedding space. And, if we have a really high uniqueness score, this means that this document is really far from everything else in the data set. And this matters because it helps you kind of investigate outliers and things like that, right? And you're able to kind of more hone in on those types of documents, right? Like, what makes these documents unique, right? Are they, corrupted documents, corrupted images in the wrong format, or they're genuinely important edge cases that the model needs to handle? Of course, more math that we can do is similarity search. So we could do similarity search either based on a text query or based on the document image embedding as well. We could do something like k nearest neighbors. So technically computing something like cosine similarity or some kind of Euclidean distance between the query embedding and all the documents embedding, and then kind of returning the top k closest matches. And this is powerful because traditional keyword search, if you type in transformer architecture, you might just get the documents that have those words, and so that misses the documents that actually show that particular architecture diagram, but maybe uses a different terminology. So the traditional kind of keyword search is going to just return the documents that mention those keywords, but aren't necessarily actually about them. Whereas an embedding-based similarity search, where you take your query, embed it with that same model, find the nearest neighbors, and then return documents that are semantically and visually similar. So then you can find documents with similar architecture diagrams, even if they don't use the same words. And so the search happens in this really rich semantic embedding space, and it goes deeper than just regular text matching. You can also compute metrics like representativeness. So this can give you a sense of what documents are most typical of each cluster. So what you could do is, cluster documents in the embedding space, and then for each cluster, find its centroid, and then compute each document's distance to that cluster centroid. And then documents that are really close to that centroid are like the most representative of that particular cluster. And so with this representativeness score, if you have a high score, that means that this document is really, really prototypical of its cluster. So it's kind of like the average case. A low representative score means that this document is really far from its cluster center. It's an edge case, a boundary example, or maybe just potentially even an outlier. And this matters for, for example, let's say you're curating data sets to go fine tune a model. If you have high representative documents, then that's great for, making a test set, doing some annotation quality checks, or even just kind of communicating with stakeholders as to what a normal document looks like. And if you have a low representative score, then this again is great for training set, because we're able to improve the model robustness on these edge cases, but then also to do kind of hard negative mining, because we're able to find out what the challenging examples are near decision boundaries. And then of course, discover annotation errors as well. But the key is with these four analyses of visualization, uniqueness, similarity, representativeness, they all kind of boil down to the same fundamental idea, is that embeddings place these semantically and visually similar documents next to each other in a vector space. Then once you have that spatial organization in that vector space, you can see the global structure through visualizations, you can measure local density through uniqueness, you can query for neighbors through similarity, and you can identify prototypical samples in your data set using representativeness. And so this helps you really understand your data set at scale. And as we'll see in just a few moments here, you can do all of this really non-trivial workflow in FiftyOne with just a few lines of code. And of course, completely open source, pip install FiftyOne, and you're able to get off and running. But I want to present like an interesting use case for us, right? NeurIPS is around the corner. If you're going to be in NeurIPS, drop me a message in the chat. Love to invite you to our meetup that we're hosting. But I'll be at NeurIPS. We're having an in-person meetup there, and then potentially even a offsite event. But in any event, NeurIPS, it's around the corner, right? There's a lot of papers, a ton of papers, 5,000 plus papers, nearly, as you can see here, nearly 6,000 papers. And you only get 3, 4, or 5 days at the conference, right? So which papers should you actually read and attend, like that are interesting to you? So traditional approach is doing what's happening here. Open the conference website, read the abstract, control F for words, maybe ask your colleagues for recommendations, and then a week later, maybe you have a list. But, there has to be a better way to do this, right? And I hope to show you this better way by using visual document retrieval models and computing these different metrics that we just discussed. So what's about to happen right now is I'm going to show you a notebook, and you'll see how we can do everything that we just discussed with just a few lines of code in FiftyOne, and then we'll open up the FiftyOne app where we can do a bit more further exploration. So first, I just want to go through the code, and then we'll look at everything in the app. So onto the code here. So I created this data set. It's a data set of, it's a narrowed down data set of just visual AI papers that are being presented at NeurIPS. And, I imagine if you're in this event, you're probably interested in visual AI as well. So I curated something like 1,100 vision papers, right? And so the challenge is, all right, identified 1,100 vision papers at NeurIPS. I've got a few days to explore. So what papers do I need to prioritize, right? And so what this notebook's going to do is the workflow as follows. We're going to load this data set from the Hugging Face Hub. We're going to compute embeddings. And then with those embeddings, we're going to do some interesting stuff with them, starting with reducing the dimensionality so that we can visualize that in the FiftyOne app. Once we have those embeddings, let's try to explore that embedding space and see if any clusters emerge, right? And then we'll use some of the different metrics like uniqueness and representativeness to kind of see what's hot, what's emerging, and what areas overlap. With these embeddings and in the FiftyOne app, you can start to semantically search your, or at least these document images, and try to find stuff that are based on your interest, right? And you'll see in the app that we're able to lasso clusters and filter and do things like that. We'll show you how to do some semantic similarity search, and then how we can potentially identify some novel work. And then from there, you should be able to build your NeurIPS schedule, because now you've kind of understood the type of papers that are presented there, and you can kind of have a sense of what is really worth checking out that's relevant to your interests. So get started. It's super easy, right? Just pip install 51, and then the rest of it here. We're going to use in this example a model called Call Modern VBERT. I'm using this model because it's just lightweight, easy, quick for the purposes of running a demo live. It's just easier. There's a few plugins that are useful that might help you along the way, so recommend installing those. And you'll start off by downloading the Visual AI dataset, Visual AI and NeurIPS dataset. It's on Hugging Face Hub. Once you've installed 51, real easy to pull that data set in. Then you can call that data set. And when you call that data set, you'll get some kind of initial information about it. All of this stuff right here is what we end up computing in this notebook. So you'll have everything up to archive category when you download that fresh data set. And this kind of gives you a sense of, okay, what is in the data set, what are the fields, things like that. We can inspect a sample up close and personal by just calling dataset.first, and we can see what that sample looks like, right? So just to kind of show you what a sample in 51 looks like. And then from there, I did a couple of things here. You don't want to go too in depth with it here, but I'm going to map the labels that I have to like a human readable format. So that's really easy to do in 51. And then once we do that, we can launch the app. So I'm going to pull up the app, and then I'm going to come back to the notebook just to kind of show you what it is that we're actually working with. So we go here, and we've got initially this data set here. Let's just clear out all the labels. You can see here we have a document image data set in 51 where we can, in this case, what I did was I just took the first page of each abstract, right? So that's, I think, enough to kind of give you a sense of what the paper is about. And you can see we have all these document images here. They're quite rich. Some of them have a lot of images embedded with them. Some of them you can see here have some the sketches and things like that, right? So very rich data set here with a lot of documents. So yeah, at first you can go ahead and just kind of explore this data set. Maybe you want to, create a dashboard, and in the dashboard, you want to create a plot, and let's just kind of look at the distribution. In this case, a distribution of, let's just do archive categories. Let's see, archive category mapped. We'll do the human readable by frequency. We'll create that plot, and then we can see, okay, well, of course, Visual AI, there's a few different archive categories to match to that, the most prominent of which is computer vision. But if you're interested, let's say, particularly in robotics, then you can see, okay, there's 94 robotics papers. You can click into that, and this will filter your data set view in the sample pane here to just those papers that are about robotics. So this initial kind of exploration that you could do. Of course, for each sample as well, the data set has parsed the raw abstract. The abstract is coming strictly from archive. So you can open the caption viewer, pull up the abstract, and then you've got the abstract here as well. If you install the plugin for keyword search, you could do a keyword search plugin, and then maybe you want to search the abstract for, let's just say, physical AI, and kind of see what comes up, right? And interesting here, we just got one paper on physical AI, right? So let's keep this paper in mind. So let's go ahead and just tag this paper here. Let's tag the sample. We'll just call this one the physical AI, right? So we saw with just the keyword match, we found only one paper about physical AI, but I reckon there's probably more about physical AI. So yeah, initial kind of cursory exploration of the data set and what's going on in there. Moving back to the code, Of course, they'll have the link to all this, the GitHub and all that. We'll share that out. But as I mentioned, I'm using Cole Modern VBERT. There's a bunch of other models that you can use further down the line. If you want to use it on your own data set or maybe hack around and change what we got going on here. I've linked them all here for you, kind of what key features are and what they're good for. But the workflow for every one of these models is essentially going to be the same. So these are what's called remote source Zoom models. First thing you got to do is register the model source and then instantiate the model. So this is going to register the implementation of the model in FiftyOne and then download the model weights from Hugging Face. Once you do that, we can compute embeddings, right? And this is kind of just a one-time operation. So each image is going to be, passed through the model here, in this case, call modern VBERT. What call modern VBERT does is that for each visual document image, it computes patches for each token, and then I just use a pooling strategy and reduce that down to a smaller vector. So kind of, when we're doing the semantic search here, we're not using multi-vectors, we're just using single vectors. But in just the one line of code, we're able to compute embeddings, right? And once we compute the embeddings, you will see the shape of the embeddings here. By the way, just to call something out, of course, like it takes a while to run these models. But what I've done is actually saved you some time. So I have already ran the models on this data set. I've computed the embeddings and computed some of the zero-shot classifications that we're going to see in a bit. And you can pull just the data set with the embeddings computed and the zero-shot classifications computed straight from Hugging Face, and then kind of work through the notebook as well. But using Cole Modern VBERT on this 1,000 plus image data set, it took about an hour and a half to compute embeddings on my M3. But you can save yourself some time just by downloading that data set. Right, so once we have the embeddings, we can just compute the visualization. So I'm just going to step through code and then we'll go right back into the app. And so you can see here, computing visualization. Again, just another one-liner in FiftyOne. And we're going to see in a moment here the embedding panels where we can see a bunch of dots, and then each dot is going to represent a document image. Then with those embeddings, we're going to build a similarity index in FiftyOne. And so the similarity index allows us to do natural language search in the app, but then also image to image similarity search in the app as well. And we'll see that in a second. But again, just building a similarity index, another one line of code in FiftyOne. You'll see in the app, of course, that you could do semantic search with text queries right in the app, but you can also do it programmatically. So I'll show you how to do that here. So in this case, we're just doing a query here for visual document retrieval and getting like the three most similar images to the search term, and then getting to the heart of it, computing these metrics. So uniqueness, right? So this again, one line of code in FiftyOne, and this is kind of the way I'm interpreting these values in the context of our use case here, right? So a low score of uniqueness, to me, that means that these are papers that are really kind of heavily researched and kind of incremental variations from the rest of what's going on in that space. My strategy for that would be maybe read one representative paper of a cluster and skip the rest. But if there's a paper that has really high uniqueness, then to me that means that's a novel kind of approach that doesn't fit the existing categories and might even be a breakthrough paper. So might be something worth reading and looking deeper into. Of course, we can also compute duplicates here. There might be papers that are actually, very similar in what it is that their contribution is or what problem that they're studying. And so we can compute duplicates or near duplicates rather in FiftyOne, again, with just another line of code. And this is helpful to help us maybe avoid redundancy, right? We don't want to read multiple papers that are essentially the same approach with just a minor variation, but also helps us identify research trends. So maybe we're able to uncover groups of papers from different teams that are coming towards a similar kind of solution. And so I'll give you kind of a schedule for how to select the right papers to read. On this data set here, you can read all this on your own. I want to get to the app as quickly as possible, but this gives you just a difference between computing duplicates and computing uniqueness, what they mean, what they represent, and how they work. Representativeness is another metric that we can compute again with just a line of code in 51. Here, the way I'm interpreting it for our use case here is that a high score of representativeness means that these are papers that are really representative of their research cluster. Maybe they give you a sense of kind of what is happening in that particular cluster. A low representative score to me means that these might be outliers or boundary papers, maybe ones that don't fit neatly into existing clusters, but they might be novel. They might be more interesting to look at. So that's kind of how I'm interpreting that representative score. Also, with that same model, we can do zero-shot classification. So what I'm going to do here is actually use that same model and see if we can use this Cole modern VBERT model to classify, like based on the document image and some text prompt, can it appropriately classify the paper? So here the text prompt is, what I'm going to do is actually just get the archive categories. So the archive categories, right, computer vision, graphics, so on and so forth. And I'm going to say, okay, similar, see which, what the model thinks this paper is most similar to. Is it, a research paper in the archive category of computer vision, graphics, so on and so forth. And then also wanted to see how well it would do just the unmapped categories. So again, just the unmapped categories, that's like the non-human readable categories. And then what we're going to do is just evaluate the classifications and just see how well the model is able to classify these images. All right, so enough of the code. You'll have a link to all this. Let's go ahead and see all this in the app and see what we uncover. So we computed a lot of metrics, computer visualization first. So let's go ahead and just with that and open the embeddings panel. So the embeddings panel, we can open it up. We can see here that, okay, well, we have, we don't see a ton of clusters form. It's quite uniform, but we do see some kind of structure in that. Also, just this is a work in progress, but just to show you guys something I'm working on is a 3D visualization as well. So I might have just broke the app by doing the 3D visualization, but let's see what happens. All right, so let's say we want to see what's in this cluster, right? So here, I'm going to clear that. We could start to see kind of pockets of research cluster, right? For example, right here, this looks like this might be a pocket of research clusters. And if we zoom in on the images in here and get a sense of what these papers are about, okay, we see that these are context-aware image editing. Here's another paper about diffusion models, multimedia distillation. Okay, so these are papers that might be similar based on perhaps some qualities of what they say in the abstract. But yeah, we get a sense of what's going on. I will say we're using a very small model. I encourage you to try all this with a larger model to get much more rich insights because those models can capture better representations as well. But we're able to see kind of, in a sense, documents that are kind of similar in their semantic context. So here we've got one that's a zero-shot 3D orientation grounding, text image generation, right? And another paper that's universal few-shot control, right? And we can see maybe they're considered to be visually similar based on the layout of the actual document, the title, the way that the papers are kind of structured and things like that. So what we could do though with this embeddings visualization, we talked about computing uniqueness. Well, I can color by a score, the uniqueness score. So what I'll do here is color by uniqueness, right? And you can see that, okay, well, this based on this model, we see a lot of kind of unique papers in a sense, right? The model is classifying a lot of these images as unique. But if we zone in on this cluster here, we can see that some of what's the most unique paper in this cluster. Well, we can see here, this one seems to be the most unique cluster. So scaling continuous time flow map distillation, right? So, as you start to explore this and kind of understand what's in the data set, you can start to find clusters of papers that might potentially be similar. Again, I encourage you to run this with one of the larger models to get more rich representations. But something we could do is, let's say we're going in here, okay, we're looking through stuff and say, okay, this paper in particular, I like this paper a lot. This seems really interesting. How about I go ahead and I sort by image similarity. What I want to do is maybe find the three most, oh, where did that go? I think I clicked out of it. What I want to do is find the three most similar papers to this one, right? And we can go ahead and do that. Then the model has to load in the background. It's doing its thing in the background. It's usually quite snappy, but of course, demo gods are not with me today. But we'll be able to see the most similar samples. So we'll let that compute, and we can find the similar papers to the one that we just had selected.
Hey, Harpreet,
yeah.
quick time check.
Oh yes. Okay. Cool. Apologies. I'm getting too hyped up here. All right. All right. Cool. So that being said, like I encourage you to kind of play around with the app, right? We can look at representative scores. We can look at the embeddings panel again. Look at the particular embeddings, color by the different things that were measured here. But then also let's just really quickly just jump to the evaluation, right? So we did some type of evaluation with the zero-shot classification. Here's the evaluation panel when we do the mapped human readable classification via the human readable names. So we can see the average confidence is quite low. We see the accuracy is quite low, precision is quite low. We can get a sense of kind of what the model is confused at things as, right? So you can see a lot of stuff that is computer vision is being classified as image and video processing, but we can maybe even click down into this right here, particular cell in the confusion matrix, and see what the model had confused. Again, there's a lot, like you can get lost in this for hours, and I encourage you to do so. Find some papers that are interesting to you. We'll go ahead and share the links for everything. You can find everything right here. So check out the org on Hugging Face, see all the data sets that we've implemented. For example, common forms. We've got that implemented here for you. You can follow me on GitHub to see what I'm up to and everything that I've been integrating lately. Next week, we're going to go more deeper. I've got a 90-minute session, so we'll go a lot more in depth. The slides are here. Jimmy will send a link to the slides as well in the email recap. Everything is on GitHub here. So just to show you on GitHub where everything's at. We can go here. Everything is nicely organized in this repo, which I'll drop a link to right now in the chat. And you can see the full notebook. And I encourage you to play around with this, use one of the other models, and get started and do some interesting stuff. Cool. So thank you again for having me. Thanks for being here. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the talk. And here's a link to the GitHub repo.